from the College by the Lake, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Local, regional, national, and international guests discussing the issues and topics affecting the way you live are on Forum, the North Idaho College Public Forum, with your host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart.
Each year, it is our pleasure to have an annual program discussing Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his teachings and writings, and in fact, the entire field of human rights. And the way we do this is that in January, before this program airs at a later date, the Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls school districts join with North Idaho College and the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations and puts on a wonderful program in our county. And then we have a guest on our program, as I've indicated, which is a couple of months after that program in January. We invite a student from Lake City High School or Coeur d'Alene High School that has entered an essay contest on Dr. King and his life, and we invite that student to give the essay on this program, and then I am joined by the superintendent of the Coeur d'Alene School District to interview that person. It's a great pleasure to welcome to the program today Jacqueline Hanna. She is a junior at the Lake City High School in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and she is the essay winner of the Dr. King essay contest. Jacqueline, it's a pleasure having you on the program, and I want to congratulate you for being the winner, and we look forward to hearing your essay in a few minutes. And thank you for being on the program.
Thank you.
And I'm very pleased to have joined us to question our guest today and to also congratulate her is Mr. Doug Cresswell, who is the superintendent of the Coeur d'Alene School District. And Doug usually joins us, and we're happy to have you back. And we thank you on behalf of our staff for all that you do to make this program a success each year.
Okay.
At this time, I would like to ask Jacqueline, if you would, for our viewers around the Northwest, tell us how you entered the essay contest and how it came about that you were the winner. And then we'll have you to read it after that.
Well, my debate coach asked me to write a speech about Martin Luther King, and I'd previously written an oratory for a debate that I had never even competed with, but I just had. And so she asked me to expand on that a little bit more and enter into the contest. And I had no idea that I'd won the contest until I had a phone call from Cresswell.
Well, again, congratulations. And would you at this time read your essay for us so our viewers can appreciate what you have done?
Okay. Now, I entitled this The Reflections on Prejudice. Bigotry, slavery, and subjugation. What do these all have in common? Three things directed at the minority, mainly black African Americans. These three vices created hatred, vengeance, and resistance. It was an awful time for African Americans when they were first brought to America as slaves of the white man. They were raised in a society where they were taught to adapt to a different culture, lifestyle, and creed. They were not adopted into society, but used as economic instruments. The cruel system of slavery flourished for 250 years, and as slavery grew, so did the feelings of racial superiority. They tried to justify all the cruelty by claiming that blacks were less than human. They were beaten like animals and received no respect or authority in the community. The only esteem they had was with their own people. Although slaves earned their freedoms after the Civil War, their freedoms were limited. Although 3 amendments were passed to ensure their freedoms and blacks were elected to high offices, the promise of equality once again was broken. Most Southern whites were determined to keep blacks poor, uneducated, and powerless. They were paid less than regular white individuals and could not partake in all white activities. They were still treated as inferior human beings. The church was the only institution that kept them together and created a sort of unity in their race. This religious culture could not be destroyed by biased laws or prejudiced views of society. For example, Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks politely refused to sit in the back of the bus so a white man could take her seat. She was arrested, yet this action sparked the Montgomery boycott against the bus system. For 381 days, black people did not ride the buses in Montgomery. They organized their own means of transportation to peacefully seek their dream of freedom. They remained nonviolent even when harassed and beaten by angry whites. Those alternate means of resistance soon had blacks returning to the buses in triumph. The U.S. Supreme Court had outlawed bus segregation in Montgomery. Prominent blacks who formed the Montgomery Improvement Association selected a newcomer in town, Martin Luther King, to be their leader. He was very important in the struggle for freedom, to help achieve that dream, the dream for freedom. He was a preacher who gave the beaten and weary black people a new hope, a hope for salvation. His words were compelling, influential, his manner gentle, yet dynamic. People had a new hope to get out of the rut of subjugation they were in. Basically, an advocate of the First Amendment rights and equal liberties, he took a new approach to solving the struggle that the African American had been having all this time with the white supremacist race. Instead of fighting back and creating violence, they should persist, solve their challenges by having their own ways of achieving their goals. There comes a time that people become tired, King told a crowd of 15,000 at Holt Church. We are here this evening to say to those who have mistreated us so long that we are tired, tired of being segregated and humiliated, tired of being kicked about by the brutal feet of oppression. We have no alternative but to protest, and we are not wrong in what we are doing. If we are wrong, the Supreme Court of this nation is wrong. If we are wrong, God Almighty is wrong. He believed that the power of Christian love could overcome the forces of hatred and bigotry. Even those who did not share the religious beliefs of King saw the effectiveness of nonviolence. Over and over again, peaceful protesters were battered by fists and clubs simply for trying to exercise their rights. These spectacles of undeserved brutality tore at the consciences of Americans and forced the federal government into action. King decided to lead his anti-segregation boycotts and mass marches to Birmingham, which was known as the South's most segregated city. He was arrested, and it was in jail where he wrote his famous A Letter from Birmingham Jail. He wrote, "I guess it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of oppression to say, 'Wait.' But he said, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. The fact that many of the people in the Birmingham movement were children, some as young as 6 years old, and were arrested, horrified the Americans. So, a settlement between King's forces and the city's businesses was worked out. The businessmen agreed to integrate downtown facilities and to hire more blacks. The activities in Birmingham fueled the movement, and civil rights activities spread." I'll ask you one thing now. If you do not remember anything else, remember these words by King. I say to you today, my friends, so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day my four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He said, "Let freedom ring." And yes, that dream still exists today. For we have segregation, and we judge one another on appearances and who we are. But do we look inside for the true value? We have the freedom to unite and hold hands, to fulfill the dream, yet we shun the idea of making the effort. None of us lack compassion or love, but we use it for all the wrong reasons. King argued that American society needed basic changes in structure to include the masses of people who are poor and without hope. True compassion, he said, is more than just flinging a coin to a beggar. It is recognizing that a system that produces beggars needs reconstructing. So, let us live out the true meaning of our creed and fulfill the dream that a man died for.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline. It is a wonderful example of where you're coming from in your heart and your intellect, and I also know that Superintendent Cresswell would join with me in saying that you're a beautiful example of why one should be proud of the public schools of our country. And again, we thank you, and I'll ask Mr. Cresswell to start the questioning.
Well, congratulations. That was well done,
Thank you.
Jacqueline, and I'm impressed with your thoughts. Certainly Dr. Martin Luther King's work for human rights, was critical to the equality for the African Americans in this country. I guess my first question might be to ask your opinion Do you think Dr. King's what Dr. King stood for and his do you think the work that he did? Do you think that work is pretty much done? Do you think the African Americans in this country have achieved pretty much equal rights? And if not, what do you think maybe still needs to be done?
Well, like I mentioned to him earlier, I was speaking of diversity, and the kind of equality that should exist in society is the equality where we accept differences, not try to be the same. And this is from a speech I read from Vital Speeches of the Day. And this was a man who spoke about the limits of diversity. And he discussed in there that equality should be everyone accepting differences, not everyone trying to be the same. Now, when you look back in history, most of our society has African influence, music and dance, all those kind of things. And it seems, although that we have not accepted that yet, that African Americans are part of our society, yet a lot of people still have those views the way things used to be. We still have not had a black president, and we have black people in high offices, yet they are still minorities. And I think that people are still looking at what's on the outside, or what is this going to do to American society. Same with women. I'm sure that a lot of people would react in a very strange or negative manner if a woman was to become president. I mean, you hear a lot of negativity about Hillary Clinton. So I think we're still not out of the rut we're in. We're still not used to change. And that's what's the problem. We're so used to living in one way, and it's hard to get out of that.
Jacqueline, I'll follow up on the question by Mr. Cresswell. As you've indicated both in your essay and in answering his first question, that people oftentimes have fear and they have prejudices because someone is different. That may be because the race or the color of the person or the gender, where there's been discrimination against women and so forth. I have a two-part question for you as a young person who talks to a lot of the young people. And by the way, our viewers should know that you've traveled and lived in many places, and so that gives you another insight. My first question is, why do some people, have such a fear or prejudice of others that because they're different? What is at the root of prejudice?
I would say, personally, it's insecurity. Because we are so unsure of ourselves that we put all that onto other people, or people, if we don't understand them, or if we don't know why they act the way they do, or they look the way they do, we just decide to mock them, or simply not try and understand them because we are so insecure ourselves. I find myself doing that a lot. I will see someone that really intimidates me, and so I will choose not to speak to them because I feel uncomfortable, and I think I should change that. I'm trying to. But I think the root of prejudice is insecurity.
And therefore, if one is insecure and one ridicules another group or community of people, that it is not correct, but that makes an individual think in their processes someone is less secure than I, or someone is less successful than I. But I hear you saying that the more secure you are as a person, you do not need to put other people down, because secure people can celebrate other people's success and their differences. My second question has to do with young people. You're in a setting with young people most of the time, and you see people being very kind to one another, and you see other times where people are being harsh, and there's some prejudice. If you are in a gathering of individuals and you see someone mistreated because of their gender or their color or whatever, what can you do as a person? What would you recommend to other people, to young people, to do? How do you address that situation when it arises?
Well, this is how I usually do it. I usually confront the problem. And if I see that a person is doing this, I will ask them straightforward, now, why do you feel you have to do this? Or I usually ask them personal questions as for example, are you insecure because you're doing this? Why do you need to make someone else feel worse than you? Or why do you have to mistreat someone? And if you really have no reason to, I always ask people why they do that. And so that gives them a chance to examine themselves, and usually they end up feeling pretty bad about what they did because they actually stop and think, no, yes, why did I do that? It's the thing, like I do it myself. I never really think before I speak and act. I think our youth today doesn't take time to examine themselves or to be secure.
The individual who's just faced this unpleasant situation and they're feeling very hurt, what can you or anyone else do in being supportive of the person who's faced the prejudice? What would you say to them, or how would you be a friend and a help?
I would say if this person who hurt them had just cause to do it, I would feel crushed. But if it was something like discriminating or saying, no, I don't like your clothes, you're ugly, something really stupid like that, I'd say words are just words. And I think the main root of all that is always insecurity. People are just so preoccupied with other people, and they pick out faults in other people because they themselves have so many. And so, I mean, if something like that was to happen to me, and it has, it wouldn't really affect me as much unless I really agreed.
But I hear you saying that the person who's faced this unpleasant experience, you're trying to convince them they're not the one with the problem.
Yeah.
It's whoever directed it at them. Doug Cresswell.
Jacqueline, I know you're from Lake City High School. We just recently, Coeur d'Alene High School kind of celebrated and recognized the 10th anniversary of their Human Rights Club at Coeur d'Alene High School. I noticed that at Lake City High School, the Human Rights Club has not been active and is not organized. I guess my question would be, is that because you don't see prejudice and human rights issues maybe at Lake City High School?
Yeah.
And the other question I'd ask you is what kind of human rights issues do students at Lake City High School and high school in general see and deal with these days?
Well, human rights in high school, I haven't experienced much at all. And I believe I went to one Human Rights Club meeting, and that was the one and only one that I even knew about, and nothing happened there. I don't even think that it's a big issue at our school, especially because it's not a very integrated school. A lot of the people come from the same background, same families. We don't have very many conflicts at all. It's a very quiet, calm school, and so many human rights issues never arise because we don't have many conflicts at all. So that's about all I can say about that.
So you think probably it's more because there really isn't a sizable minority population and
not at all.
Pretty homogeneous student body then at Lake City High School. Certainly there, you must see and students must deal with issues of prejudice or human rights, or you just
well, of course,
see very little of it.
There's the labeling, that people judge each other by the way they dress, just like the homies, the stoners, the skaters, that kind of thing. I don't know if that's prejudice. I think that's just stereotyping, but that's about as bad as it gets.
That's very good to hear.
Jacqueline, you've traveled, you've lived in Europe, and you live in other parts of the United States, and now here in Idaho. Give our viewers some idea of the appreciation you have for many cultures that you have been exposed to and lived in your short life.
Let's see. Every place I've been to has had a different culture to contribute, especially if you go into I don't know if it's Western or Eastern, I'm not good with directions. Well, like Bulgaria and Yugoslavia. Everything there is, when you go to the smaller towns, it's more down to earth. People ride around on donkeys, and they buy watermelons from street vendors in the mornings for breakfast. Everything is just natural, pure. It's beautiful. You learn to start conserving. You don't waste things like we do here. It's not as industrial. You start appreciating natural things. When you live in a place like Kansas, you live in a very integrated place, and you appreciate how different people are. You learn to live with them. You grow up with them. I mean, a lot of the black churches, they're just beautiful. They're very spiritual, and they give you good feelings. You don't sit there and listen to someone speak for long periods of time. Germany. Now, although Germany has had a bad reputation because of its history, Germans are trying to make up for that. They're trying to be hospitable, and they're taking in Bosnian refugees. They're shutting down hotels to put Bosnian refugees in them. They clothe them and feed them. Seems like every place I've been to has tried to make up for some of the wrongs it's committed before. And I guess you never learn enough unless you are in different places. And like you said earlier, if you're just in one place and reading about it, you'll never really know about it unless you've seen it and been there. But I think I wouldn't be as accepting of other people if I hadn't grown up in Europe like I did and traveled so extensively. And you really start to appreciate how every culture has their own little charms and how welcoming they are in different ways.
That we're all human, and we have so much in common, even with different cultures. Tell us a little bit about the problems in Eastern Europe. We hear many reports from there that there's a lot of ethnic divisiveness, and it's a historical problem. And as we see what's happening with the Serbs and the Bosnians and the Croatians and others, am I not correct to say that there are these divisive problems all around the world where people do emphasize their differences rather than how they can work in peace together? Give us a little idea of what you think is going to happen and how serious that division is.
Well, I see it in both ways. Now, you have the Serbs and the Muslims and the Croats, and I think first, they're all trying to be their own group. They're trying to be individuals. And when you are recognized as being an individual, then you tend to isolate yourself into your own group. And it also could go another way, that they are trying to make one united place. Like all the Muslims want everyone else to be Muslims. So that's creating problems because not everyone wants to conform to that one ideal. So either way, it's kind of bad, because when you're isolating yourself and you're only staying with your own kind, so to speak, then you are creating problems with the rest of the world or the rest of that hemisphere, because you are not willing to live with them or among them. And if you are trying to be similar to everyone else, then, like I said, the diversity is very, very important. I mean, that's how we have social progress, with diversity. And so with those different religions and those different groups trying to uniform everybody, that's creating a lot of revolts, uprisings.
I think you put your finger on a problem, and that is that one of the reasons why people become isolated or try to make everyone conform to a particular set of laws is that they perceive they have found the truth, and therefore they're not tolerant of those who think they have a different truth. Is that not part of the problem?
Yeah, that's one example of that is religion. I mean, a lot of Christians shun Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons just because they feel like what they have is the right way and the only way. And they are not accepting the other. They're not willing to listen to that, the diversity. They only want to hear what they seem or accept to be true.
Doug Cresswell.
Jacqueline, our local Aryan Nations organization has received quite a lot of national attention. And I'm wondering, among young people, high school students these days, whether the Aryan Nations organization, located north of Hayden Lake, is a concern for young people, and is there much talk among young people about the Aryan Nations activities, and what's your reaction, your thoughts about that as a young person?
I don't think they're a threat at all. If they were, a lot of things would have happened already. No, they've spread around some propaganda, but it has been ineffective. I don't think a lot of people are afraid of it at all. And if they felt like they had to do some major ethnic cleansing, I think they would have already done that if they really feel as strongly. Now, I think it's almost a masquerade that they're putting on. Now, I hope they're not listening because they might think I'm trying to provoke them to do something. No, I'm not saying that. But when I see them around town, or I have seen them, they all dress the same. They have the shaved heads and the suspenders and the white T-shirts and the boots and all the tattoos that say, "I hate Jews." I think it's a show. And I don't know how to explain it. I wouldn't want to, because I have no idea. But I think it's hilarious when I see them. I think it's just absolutely funny. Because I don't think it's necessary. It's awful, but it's funny at the same time, why they have to walk around letting everyone know how they feel or what their personal biases are. It's very unnecessary. I mean, I think the only thing that would do to them is get them in trouble. If there were some people who disagreed with their views, they might decide to beat them up.
We only have a little over 1 minute left, and I want to end the program with having you to tell our audiences what you think the greatest message that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. left for us. All the studying you've done and the writing.
Well, I would say the will to survive is the best resistance to him, and if you want to help out, make change, not to seek it by violence.
In peaceful ways. With that note, I have a signal that we're out of time. On behalf of Doug Cresswell and our staff, Jacqueline, thank you for being with us. Jacqueline Hanna, you've been very great on our program, and we are very appreciative that you came and took this time to be with us, and congratulations again for winning the essay. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you to be with us again next week at this same time when we'll discuss yet another issue. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
The North Idaho College Public Forum was videotaped live from the studios of Instructional Technology on the campus of North Idaho College for viewing at this more appropriate time. We invite you to join us again next week for another all-new edition of the North Idaho College Public Forum on this public television station.